Thanks for being here. What do you see as the biggest issue facing Wyandotte County right now?
So obviously being on this trail for 6.5 months or whatever it's been now, and listening to the residents and listening to the businesses in our community, the number one issue from these folks is property taxes. And I don't disagree with them. And if we don't do something to expand our tax base, so to increase our density and to expand our tax base through development, I don't know that we're going to be able to bring any relief anytime soon. So those are two priorities, certainly of mine.
So how do you do that without raising taxes on people who are already there? Where do you find that growth?
Look, we've had developers that have been sitting on the sidelines for a while. We have become stagnant in our growth in KCK, and it's unfortunate. And I think that these folks have looked at the instability that has been in our local government for a while, and it makes them nervous, right? Instability always makes business nervous. And so what we need to do is stabilize our leadership, right? So we need to ensure that, my office and the county administrator and the commissioners are all singing off the same song sheet. And once we do that, those developers are going to come off the sidelines. And is it going to be an overnight fix? No, Cody, it's not going to be an overnight fix. But we have to be intentional about how we approach this. And if people like, I'm a resident too, right? If I'm ever going to see any property tax relief, we have to be intentional about growing our density, growing our population, and including more development, which could be anything from small business to big developments.
Anything about outside taxes for people maybe coming into the county, anything like that? Is that
So like a transient guest tax?
Sure.
Well, I think, as you may know, the commission has recently taken up that issue, and I believe they have agreed to increase it some. And, I think that's in a response to the World Cup. I think that there is a plan to perhaps sunset that as well. And I'm not a proponent of sunsetting that. We are the #1 visitor attraction in the state of Kansas in the Legends. #1 in the state of Kansas, right? I'm not trying to penalize others, but I go to other states, I travel, I understand how folks are funding things. And there really is no reason for us not to pursue that and try to diversify our revenue stream even further.
You mentioned the Legends, one of the proposed sites for a Chiefs and/or Royals stadium. We still have the clock running on Star Bonds. If elected mayor, are you pushing hard for those teams to come to town?
Look, most of that is being done at the state level. I mean, let's just be honest about that, right? But am I, as mayor, going to not welcome billion-dollar franchises, sports franchises into our community? I would welcome them with open arms, and I've said that. I mean, we have to have deals that are right for our community, right? We have to make sure that that balance is there. Don't know that we've always had that in the past. Look, I've been an attorney in the private sector for 30 plus years. I've negotiated some deals before. I know good deals when I see them, and hopefully if that opportunity is presented to us, that we make a deal that is right for our community. I know it's Wednesday. I'm still, are we in Victory Wednesday? I don't know what the rules are anymore, so I try to wear red every day just in case.
There you go. Well, it's always hoping for a Victory Monday or Tuesday, whatever it would be.
That's right.
Let's talk about your experience. You have decades of experience in the private sector. You're also on the Board of Public Utilities. How do you translate that to government work?
Yeah, when in its simplest form, in the industry that I've been in, telecommunications industry, I've worked inside companies, I've been their outside counsel, but it's all been working with investor money, right? And so you adapt that over into a public model, and so our investor money is taxpayer money. And you have an obligation, no matter which side of this you're on, the private sector, the public sector, to be responsible, fiscally responsible with that money, to be transparent about how it's being spent, to deliver a product or service. In this case, deliver the local services that our local government provides to our residents and businesses today, and to do it with world-class customer service. Those things translate unbelievably well to one another. The other thing is efficiency, right? That's something we don't always see in the public sector. And I would love for us to drill down on that and try to provide our services as efficiently as we can. When we talk about fiscal responsibility, we've got folks who think we can cut our way out of, some of the financial issues we see today. I don't believe that is the case. I believe we have a revenue issue, but I think we can walk and chew gum at the same time. So while we're growing our revenue, right, through this development, through added density and things like that, at the same time, let's look at how efficiently we can actually provide our services in KCK.
Does that mean a little belt tightening?
It may, right? Maybe we rely more on technology than we have in the past. I think that there are some departments that are still doing things in an antiquated way. And, again, I've been in an industry, I've seen all kinds of things. And, I know when folks are trying to put things together, a lot of times manual processes, they just persist and they prevail. And it's almost 2026. We've got to modernize, how we're providing those services to the extent we can.
Let's talk about that. What sort of changes would you like to see within the unified government?
Some of it's easy, right? Some of it is being intentional about being responsive to our residents and businesses, whether that's answering an email or answering a phone call. I do hear often that it's difficult to do business, no matter if you're a resident or or a business, to do business with the unified government. We've got to break down some of those barriers. And some of the stuff is just going to the basics, right? Like I said, answering an email, maybe returning a phone call, right? Even if you don't have the answer, be responsive. And honestly, that's half your battle right now. The other part of it is, and this is not as easy, right? We need to change the culture inside the unified government. And, some of it is just, you've got a very old entity, right, in the unified government that it's hard to turn that ship, right? But at the end of the day, you bring a positive, work culture, and that starts at the top, right? We start with a positive culture. We start with a responsive culture, from my office. And that transcends into the county administrator's office, into every single department. There are great folks that work at the unified government. I do feel like when I've spoken to them, some of them feel very beaten down. And, nobody wants to go to a place where that is your work culture. I've been there, I've worked in them. It's not fun. And I'm not asking for this to be fun, but I am asking, these folks need to understand how important their jobs are to our entire community. Sometimes I think that's lost because what doesn't cost any money? Appreciation. And I think getting back to some of those basics from the top down, I think is going to do a world of good in changing the culture there.
Last question, what do you think makes you the best candidate for the job?
I think it's just, it's my experience. And, I've had folks sort of tell me, well, hey, you can't run this like a business. And maybe you can't run the local government like a business, but maybe we ought to adopt some business tenets to this, right? I've been at this, and I've been in leadership positions. I've been in executive positions for a long time. I've had a very successful career, and I'm often say I'm at the end of my regular career. I don't need this job, right? I want this job. And you want somebody in there who wants to go in and try to leave this better than they found it. I was born and raised in Wyandotte County. This means something to me. And, I know it means something to generally everybody who puts their name on a ballot, but I wouldn't have done it if I didn't think I could be successful with this.